Hi everybody, thanks for having me today. As the title says, here I'm to share a little bit about my experiences as a first-time female founder, which is something that really deeply resonates with me because it's actually quite rare to meet another female founder out there, especially in medtech. Let me get into it. Just a little bit about us, Creatology. Our flagship product is a reproductive health medtech device. And so what we do is we want to bring a natural and safe way of bringing birth control to women across the world. We actually first developed the prototype as a concept in the Philippines. Essentially, we've been developing the prototype for the past few years, and we're about to take it to market. Just to talk a little bit about this market, the reason why it came from the Philippines is because there was a mandate a number of years ago in the Philippines requiring contraception to the masses, universal access. If anybody knows anything about the Philippines, it is a heavily, heavily Catholic country. And so this is the reason why a high-tech, natural, and safe alternative to contraceptives was developed. And this is a little bit of the statistics about contraceptive use in the Philippines. Ultimately, there are a large percentage of women who use contraceptives in the Philippines, but one of the most interesting statistics is that withdrawal is a very, very popular method, very largely probably due to the fact that it's a very Catholic country. And so the reason for developing our device as well is to really help supplement the use of a natural and safe method for family planning. Ultimately, this also leads into what we do for our device. So we are proposing it as both a standalone and a connected device. It's actually just inserted like a tampon. So the reason why we developed this as a highly accurate and safe device is because it uses more than one data point to triangulate how to determine ovulation status. So ultimately, as a device like this, it can go either way. It can help initiate or to help prevent pregnancy. So a little bit more statistics. I know everybody loves facts. So we look at a different market completely. So in the United States, these are fairly recent statistics. 63% out of all women who have reported ever using the birth control pill actually discontinue it. And they report the reason for discontinuation is because of side effects. And this is actually a growing trend. I think for the women in this room, perhaps you've heard of other alternative safe methods for contraception. And so this is a growing trend. We need to have more ways for women to be informed about their bodies, about their health, particularly their reproductive health. And so this is hopefully a way that women can be able to understand themselves about fertility. And from another study, actually, we actually term this called the awareness-based methods. They're evidence-based. So the reason why we don't rely on, say, the calendar method is because it's highly inaccurate. It's a lot of guesswork. And having a device that is certified as a medical device, it's something that ultimately can accurately diagnose ovulation, is something that will empower women to understand more about their bodies. So that's a lot of background and a lot of history, and I'm up here to tell you a little bit about the lessons I've learned being a female founder. So we are an early stage tech startup. The history of our company hasn't been that far ahead yet, but the reason why I bring up being a female founder is so important is because, embarrassingly enough, I'm running something to do with reproductive health, and I found that actually I don't know that much about reproductive health. And one of the problems is a lot of people I've spoken to giving me advice and giving me information about the investor world out there, people that I will talk to, they tell me a lot. It's a male-dominated world out there, and they won't get it. And this is both true and not true because I've spoken to a lot of men who also understand it from a fertility standpoint. A lot of people are currently struggling to conceive, and so they do know there is value in this in the fertility space. But it is true, a lot of people don't get it. And I'll supplement this with more statistics because everybody loves statistics. A little bit more about just the VC space in Canada. These are actually pretty recent statistics from a report that was generated by femalefunders.com. Basically, they say that a quick review of the VC space in Canada, 14% of partners are women. This is actually double than what you see in the US, which is great. But if you dig deeper into the statistics, 0% of venture partners are actually women. Basically, they have some statistics that they can't go into. They're private. So based on public data, really, there just are not very many women out there. I also look towards a lot of female-based, female-founded companies for inspiration, as well as a little bit of just a strategy to understand how we might take our product to market. This is a company called Thinx. So they produce period-free, leak-proof underwear. And this is actually a story that I followed along quite closely because they are also going through something very similar, where the founder mentioned that they tried everything, but nobody understood the product. They couldn't take it to VCs because VCs wouldn't fund it in the initial stages. And so what they did, they actually started through Kickstarter. They got some market traction, and then they were able to attract investors. Lesson number 2 is actually self-defense lessons come standard. I'll explain this in a moment. So I was actually part of a cohort of amazing female founders, part of a program called Fierce Founders. And we went through a lot of workshops. So we learned about sales, marketing, entrepreneurship in general. But we also had a self-defense workshop. And this was largely because we were all women. And this is, I don't think, a standard workshop you would get if you went to, say, Y Combinator. But this was something that really stood out to me because in a group full of women, all female entrepreneurs, we talked a lot about our safety, our experiences as women in a room full of men, possibly investors. That's something that really stuck out to me. And this is the final lesson. I think this will be more understandable across the board for everybody. Be a relentless feedback filter. So as an entrepreneur, sorry, this is a little bit crass, but essentially I see feedback in one of two senses. Is it fuel or is it farts? Is it important or is it hot air? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that everybody wants to know more about what they're doing. Everybody wants to get a little leg up in talking to people and doing research. And that's great, but ultimately that could also bring you down as well. Everybody's a critic. Everybody either has really terrible things to say about your company, or the worst part is that they have really good things to say about your company, but when you ask them, would you actually buy this product, they say no. So I don't know how that helps. But ultimately, I found that speaking to a lot of people is really great, but you have to keep your objectives aligned with what your vision is. And this sounds really obvious in hindsight, but I feel that this is something that's important to bring up because ultimately feedback is critical to how you build your business, how you talk to your market, and how you really push forward. So fuel or farts. So yeah, that's me today. Thank you for having me, and I'll field any questions that are out there.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I actually don't have a question, but I do want to acknowledge and appreciate your presentation today. It's very inspiring, and I love to hear about the product, and I would actually use that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, that was really good. I was wondering if the cost of your product will be accessible to the populations you want to help?
Yes, one of our go-to market strategies is essentially a TOMS model, if you will. So we want to have it two-tier pricing so that ultimately, because there are two main objectives for this device. So one is to prevent pregnancy and one is to initiate pregnancy. So ultimately, the market here in North America is probably going to be largely focused on initiating pregnancy. So we do want to price it at a higher tier level, partly subsidize it for women in countries that they would use it for birth control. But also there are opportunities to work with governments where they have budgets for contraceptives. One of the largest sort of potential customers is the Philippines government, just because there is a huge unmet demand at that moment. So for sure, there are going to be very low price points accessible to women in other countries.
So what is the reaction so far from women in the Philippines about your product? Is it positive, or have you gotten any feedback about that?
We don't have too much feedback on that side yet. We've mostly been developing it here in Toronto,
Okay.
but we do have people that we've been talking to over there that are really, really interested in the product, and that's part of the go-to-market strategy as well.
Thanks.
Thanks, Andrea.